The Black Hills, Bear's Butte, Devil's Tower, and the valleys of the Powder, the Tongue, and the Little Bighorn rivers. Around the year 1500, famine, epidemics, and war put entire populations in motion. Arikara and Hidatsa went northward, close to the falls of the High Missouri River, where the Mandan tribes already lived. The Crows, in turn, populate the valleys of the Little Bighorn, the Powder, and the Tongue rivers. Around the mid-18th century, huge herds of horses gone feral after the 1680 Pueblo Revolt come up from the south. From then on, starting from New Mexico, a number of tribes colonize the Great Plains, abandon horticulture, and become buffalo hunters on horseback. In the east, meanwhile, the arrival of European colonists, the Beaver Wars, and the wars between France and Britain pushed the Great Lakes tribes westward. In their earth lodge villages on the High Missouri, Mandan, Hidatse, and Arikara traded guns coming from the east for horses coming from the south, 1 for 1. The Great Crow Fair is the meeting place of Indian beaver hunters, French-Canadian coureurs de bois, and British trappers. The Crows enjoy a period of great wealth. Around the year 1760, several Teton Sioux groups, defeated by the Ojibwa, start leaving Minnesota to go westward to the Dakota. The Sioux push the Cheyenne and the Arapaho towards the Black Hills and Devil's Tower, and start encroaching Crow country, rich in horses, where they can hunt the buffalo of the great northern herd. For about 50 years, the tribes in the Earth Lodge villages on the Missouri River check Teton Sioux expansion, but they are almost wiped out by the 1838 smallpox epidemic. Thereafter, the Sioux bands and their Cheyenne allies are free to wander from the Platte River to the Missouri River. In the meanwhile, a new power is rising on the eastern horizon, the United States of America. But after Lewis and Clark's course of exploration, the American government forgets the Far West, busy with the Texan War and the issue of slavery. In 1846, however, a continual flow of colonists starts crossing the Great Plains through the New Oregon Trail. The gold rushes of California, Nevada, and later Montana transform the flow into a flood. Waves of immigrants from Ireland, Germany, and Poland looking for freedom and wealth come to stay, and many work on the new transcontinental railroads. In 1854, the war breaks out on the Oregon Trail near Fort Laramie. The Sioux chief Conquering Bear, U.S. Lieutenant Grattan, and 29 soldiers die. On April 12, 1861, the Civil War begins between the Union and the Confederation. The regular army goes eastwards, and only the territorial militias are left to protect the colonists. Now, Sioux and Cheyenne can expand into the area beyond the Bighorn River, invading the lands between the Powder River and the Bighorn Mountains. They expel the Crows, who had been living there for 3 centuries. The Montana Gold Rush and the opening of the Bosman Trail are the cause of Red Cloud's war. In 1868, the Fetterman Massacre is a defeat for the U.S. Army. In 1869, however, the new railroad, which reaches the gold fields, makes the Bosman Trail useless. The Army abandons the forts on the trail, and the Indians burn them down. In 1868, the Treaty of Fort Laramie ratifies the Sioux occupation of the Crow homelands on the rivers Powder, Tongue, and Little Bighorn. Squeezed between Sioux expansionism, involving a ruthless ethnic cleansing, and American expansion, perceived as more remote and benign, the Crows joined the U.S. Army as scouts, together with the Arikara and the Pawnee. In the meantime, the Sioux are divided between those, such as Red Cloud and Spotted Tail, who have visited the American cities in the East, and those, such as Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, who cannot conceive of stopping buffalo hunting and killing the Crows. A geological military expedition, led by Colonel George Armstrong Custer, discovers gold in the Black Hills. Thousands of gold miners encroach upon Sioux territory in spite of the military patrols, and some are killed by the Sioux. President Grant decides to solve the police problem represented by the hostile Indians, and orders them to register themselves at the forts throughout the winter of 1875-76. But the hostiles don't obey, so the Army launches a campaign involving 3 columns. General Crook marches from the south. General Terry, with Colonel Custer, comes from the northwest, and Colonel Gibbon marches from the west. The hostile Indians, meanwhile, have gathered on Little Bighorn in Crow Country for the annual buffalo hunt. Among them, there are famous chiefs and warriors: Sitting Bull, Gull, Rain in the Face, White Bull, and Chief Crow of the Hunkpapa, Crazy Horse, He Dog and Low Dog of the Oglala, Hump and Iron Plume of the Minakanju, Short Bull of the Sikangu, Two Moons, and Lame White Man of the Northern Cheyenne. Guided by the Crows, eager to win their lands back, the first column, led by General Crook, clashes with the Sioux and Cheyenne, led by Crazy Horse. It's the inconclusive Battle of the Rosebud on June 17, 1876, but the soldiers stopped their advance. After some days, when the Indians thought the soldiers wouldn't come, a new threat appears: the advancing 7th Cavalry, led by Custer. Arikara and Crow scouts warn Custer that the hostiles are far too many, from 900 to 2,000, according to the historian. But Custer tries his famous luck once again. At 2 p.m. on June 25, 1876, Custer orders Major Reno to attack the Indians from the south, while the Arikara scouts are to frighten the hostiles' horses away. At 3:15, Reno charges the Hunkpapa Sioux with 3 companies from the south, but they fight back and force Reno to retreat into a river thicket, then to wade the river and entrench his men on a hillock ridge. It's 3:55. When Captain Benteen arrives with his battalion and the wagon trains at 4:39, the situation is critical. Benteen decides to entrench himself at Reno Hill and not to reach Custer, as ordered by the famous message brought by trumpeter John Martini. Meanwhile, Custer, going northward, sees both Reno's attack and the huge Sioux and Cheyenne camp, but decides to go on with his pincher movement. At the Medicine Tail Coulee, which leads directly to the village, French Sioux interpreter Mitch Boyer and Crow Scout Curly warn Custer that Reno has retreated, but Custer opts for a two-pronged attack. Captain Yates, with the left wing, attacks through the Medicine Tail Coulee, while Custer, with the right wing, goes northward to conclude the maneuver. At first, Yates' soldiers meet scarce resistance, but having blocked Reno, Gall's warriors are free to counterattack. Under pressure, the soldiers start retreating in a skirmish line towards Calhoun Hill. Gall's Hunkpapa start to filter out through the coulees and the ravines south of Calhoun Hill. The Cheyenne, led by Two Moons and Lame White Man, camp on the north side of the village, crowd together under Greasy Grass Ridge, and start a surrounding movement. Custer unites his two wings at Calhoun Hill, goes northwest along Cemetery Ridge, and arrives at the northern ford of the Little Bighorn near Squaw Creek. Here, the column begins to retreat, perhaps because Custer is dead, according to some Crow witnesses. Meanwhile, Crazy Horse, with several warriors, wades the river at the deep ravine just north of the village, and takes position after a long tour through Battle Ridge, east of Custer's right wing. The 210 soldiers are surrounded by the Hunkpapa from the south, the Cheyenne from the west, and Crazy Horse's Oglala from the east. From a distant hill, Crow Scout Curly sees the soldiers for the last time and rides away. It's 4:30. From this moment on, we can rely only on forensic archaeology to support historical knowledge. At first, the soldiers seem to be able to maintain the skirmish line, but later, Troop L at Calhoun Hill starts to yield ground. Tom Custer's Troop C charges along Calhoun Hill, but fails. To help Troop C, Lieutenant Calhoun moves part of the skirmish line, but Gall exploits this move, attacking from the south. Panicking, the soldiers break their defense line, and in a few minutes, Troop C and L are swept away. Only few survivors can retreat to Keogh's position about 400 meters far. The collapse at Calhoun Hill is the beginning of the end. In turn, Captain Keogh's Troop I yields and leaves the eastern flank open to Crazy Horse's attack. Only 100 soldiers survive on Cemetery Ridge and Custer Hill, under crossfire and surrounded by the Indians, who outnumber them 10-1. A group of cavalrymen possibly tries to hide in the deep ravine, but they are massacred. At Custer Hill, about 50 survivors prepare for the last stand. Custer, may be dead, wounded, or dying, is on the top of the hillock, near his brother Tom's body full of arrows, as well as his other brother Boston, Captain Yates, and Cook, and a handful of men. When the Indian tide retreats, the corpses of 42 soldiers and 39 horses lie on Custer Hill. Forensic archaeology has demonstrated that there wasn't an actual last stand and that Custer soldiers were swept away by only one charge. At about 5:20, when the battle still rages on the north side of the Indian camp, Captain Weir, who was with Captain Benteen, tries to go and help Custer. From a ridge, he sees on the northern hillocks a group of Indians brandishing the swallow-tailed pennant of one of Custer's troops. It's 6:30. The Indians are coming south to give Reno's troopers the coup de grace. Benteen reinforces the trenches at Reno Hill. The soldiers dig foxholes and spend an uneasy night tormented by thirst and Indian snipers. A group of soldiers earn their medals crawling along the water carrier ravine to fill their canteen. On the following morning, June 26th, the Indians attack again. But the soldiers resist. In the afternoon, the Indians put the prairie on fire and typically give up fighting, break their huge camp, and scatter around the northern plains. The victory of Little Bighorn cost the hostile Indians more dearly than a defeat or a surrender to the government's ultimatum. The press and the public opinion cry out for vengeance. Even if most of the U.S. Army was busy in the East to stop the railroad workers' strike, less than a year later, the die-hard's way of life was over forever. Crazy Horse was dead. Sitting Bull in Canada, the Cheyenne deported to Oklahoma. All the hostile bands were forced to stay on the reservations, without conditions, no treaties to sign, nothing left. Not even Red Cloud Sioux horses, stolen by the Pawnee Scouts. The sacred Black Hills are in the hands of the Americans. And the territory the Sioux longed for was given back to their owners, the Crows, who still live there. The Little Bighorn battlefield lies in the center of the Old Crow territory. The Crows and their white neighbors in Hardin, Montana, have transformed the battlefield into a heritage tourist gold mine. Today, the Crows play both themselves and their Sioux and Cheyenne foes in two reenactments. In Crow country, history is written by the Crows.
And they may go for days, for weeks, the Fighting Cheyennes, thousands of non-treaty Indians. Gold. They do find gold.